not sure how well you could hear that video, but one of the most touching parts of that video for me was when we were bringing some of these guys back to the villages they had liberated, and the people they liberated are still in the towns. They might be, if they were kids, they might be in their 70s. If they were older, they're in their 80s. And if they were actually the same age as the soldier, they were 97, like that woman you saw hanging out the door of the window, pointing herself out in his photos that he took during the war, okay? So I've only cried twice in my life. When my dog died, and then on that alleyway in Italy, watching this lady and him talk about his photos, I was bawling my eyes out, so. In the video that we originally just had watched, 93 men and women had signed this rifle, and now I'm up to about 110 names on this rifle, 110 stories, 110 legacies, and you know, I only started this maybe 2 years ago. 3 years ago maybe, and what I've learned is a lot of the World War II veterans who they're also known as the generation who, didn't talk about it, right? But a lot of them are talking about it now because I feel like many of them, they no longer want to die with their secrets. They don't want to die without these stories being told. And you're starting to see a lot of more men and women come out of the woodwork as far as what they did in the war. And now that there's so less of them left, that we're starting to hear stories we never did hear before. So why did I start getting men to sign a rifle? Well, yeah, I served in the Marine Corps from 2006 to 2012. I'm an Iraq and Afghanistan infantry Marine. Loved every second of it, but I knew for sure I wanted to get the hell out after I was done. I serve now as a police officer, and you wouldn't believe how many wellness calls I get for elderly men and elderly women whose family are concerned about, can you go check on them? You make your way into the house, and the first thing you see is medals, silver stars, and ribbons, and it's like, holy shit, this guy was living in my community. I had no idea he was an ex-POW. I had no idea he earned a Silver Star. I had no idea he had the Distinguished Service Cross. It started to really open my eyes up and finally appreciate history. So, growing up, my uncle had been killed in action. The first Andrew Biggio, right? So I'm the third Andrew Biggio. So technically I'm the fourth Andrew Biggio. Not to get technical here, but the Andrew Biggio before me who served in combat was killed in action with the 135th Infantry Regiment, Company B. He was 19 years old. Now, my whole life I grew up seeing Andrew Biggio square down the street from my house. And it was just something I rode my bicycle by. It was something my friends teased me about, that I had my own square, and really it wasn't me. It was about this kid who got killed when he was 19 years old. But when you're a young boy, you don't think about that. And even when I went to the Marine Corps, I didn't even realize that the last person to leave my house to go to war didn't come back, and his name was Andrew Biggio. So it kind of messed with my mind. I had my own combat experiences overseas. I came home, and that sign, Andrew Biggio Square, was still sitting there. And it really started to get into, my brain even more. What happened to this Andrew Biggio that didn't happen to me? Why is it fair that I got to come home and he didn't? And then it led to, I knew he wrote letters home before he was killed in action. Where are those letters? So one day I go under my grandmother's bed, I pull out the letters that were collected in a shoebox that he wrote home from May until September of 1944. The first letter I read was how much he enjoyed to shoot the M1 rifle, which, if you don't know, was the standard issue rifle of that time. I immediately had to go and buy an M1 rifle. I wanted to be connected to this kid. I wanted to have something that he carried in the war, so I went out and I purchased a 1945 M1 Garand. I bought it, I started to show my family, like, hey, this is the rifle that Andrew was carrying. This is the kind of rifle they used in the Second World War. And it didn't really click to them. They had never served in the military. It wasn't their fault, but all they saw as a gun, And so I said, okay, now what? I have this rifle, and, why don't I take it to my neighbor? I know my neighbor had fought in World War II. His name was Joseph Drago. He had served in the Battle of Okinawa, a very, very large Marine and Army battle, primarily Marine Corps, but it was one of the worst battles of all time, really. So I knock on Joe's door with this rifle in my hand, and he answers the door, and now Joe's 93 years old, he's in a wheelchair, his legs have atrophied to, almost string beans from not walking in a wheelchair, and I said to him, "Hey Joe, do you remember this?" And of course I put the rifle with no signatures on it in his hands. And Joe gets this burst of energy in his wheelchair, and he just starts waving around the room and swinging it around, and he's got a smile from ear to ear, and I said, "Holy crap, this thing is magical, right?" And he starts telling me all about the Battle of Okinawa and landing on the beaches on April Fool's Day of 1945, and it gets more in depth, And he says, "Go to my top sock drawer. I want to give you something. It's in a velvet Crown Royal bag. Go in the sock drawer and get it out." I know people are laughing because they're thinking that he's going to give me alcohol, but I get the Crown Royal bag, I get it, I open it up, and inside of it are Japanese gold teeth. Okay? That him and his squad, and that, do I have to paint the picture for you? I think you get it. And he said, "These are yours now." And first of all, as a Marine, I'm like, hell yeah. Okay? Not that, these guys would go out there committing war crimes, but it just was a different time and a different battle. And if this man was able to live such a long, successful life after this hellacious fighting, after this combat, so can, the OIF and OEF veterans. But I didn't want to forget the moment, and I asked Joe to sign the rifle, and he did. He put his name on it. I was using a whiteout pen at the time. And I left his house after hearing about 3 hours worth of the Battle of Okinawa, and I'm looking down at his name on this rifle, and I said, "I think I want to get as many damn signatures as I possibly can on this rifle and hear more of these stories. Why aren't more of my veteran generation who may be coming home and dealing with whatever issues that they've gathered from their combat deployments, why aren't they talking to these guys who are in their 90s? They did it. They went to war, they came home, they started a family, they had a career, they had a job, they had a life, they had kids, they had their white picket fence, they had a home. If they can do it, if they can go through World War II, so can we." So then I started to go get guys from the European theater to sign the rifle. Until it came down to get to the nitty-gritty. Who was on that hill in Italy with Andy Biggio when he got killed? So I went to the 34th Division website. I started to go through the after-action reports that were declassified. In 2001, I was pulling names out, Silver Star citations, Bronze Star citations. Where are these guys? Are they alive? Andrew was killed September 17th, 1944, assaulting what was known as the Gothic Line. Okay, this was a defense system network of U-shaped trenches, pillboxes, foxholes, spider holes. The Germans had it built since maybe 41 or 42. They had it mastered. You didn't have a chance, really, if you were a grunt and not a young grunt assaulting these hills that the Germans were just waiting for you. Okay, they had ox pull up their artillery up the hills and point them right down at the Americans. So, reading the after-action reports, I find a Silver Star citation belonging to a Mr. Carl DeChico on September 17, 1944, of the 135th Infantry Regiment, Company G, Golf Company, okay? And I read this citation, and the guy's an ultimate badass, and I go right to the white pages and I look up Carl DeChico. Maybe he's still alive, because back then the citations would have what town you enlisted from. So I find Carl DeChico from Norristown, Pennsylvania, with his phone number listed, and I call him. All right? I might have done this 10 times before I got to Carl DeChico. Someone answers the phone. I said, "Carl, my name's Andy Biggio. I'm from Massachusetts. My uncle served in the..." "What? Massachusetts? You liberal bastards!" And he hangs up the phone. I didn't flip 2 words up. So I'm totally defeated. One, this guy thinks I'm a liberal bastard. And 2, fuck, he just hang up the phone in my face. So I call him back. I get another 3 minutes before he thinks I'm a scam again, hangs up the phone. I got probably about 10 signatures on this rifle by then. I said, no way am I letting this guy slip through my fingers. I removed the upper handguard of the M1. I said, I may never see this piece of the rifle again, but I'm mailing it to his house with the pen, with photos of the other veterans who signed this. Maybe that'll prove I'm not a fraud to this guy. And I knew I could always buy another piece up here and, you know, whatever. Anyways, 2 weeks goes by, there's a box sitting on my front porch. And it's signed, Carl DeChico, Company G, 135th Regiment. And there's a note that says, I'm sorry that I thought you were a fraud. Today I turned 94. Good luck with your project. I get on the phone, I call him, I say, hey Carl, I got the piece of the rifle. He said, what's that? You're coming down to visit me? I said, no, but okay. So, the guy who wanted nothing to do with me, is right there. You can see it. He's 95 now. Give me a second, guys. Nope, screw that up. I want to do a slideshow. So this Carl, you know, he's got a blanket over him, he's having his gallbladder drained. He welcomed me into his nursing home, and we talked about the 135th Infantry Regiment, and in his case, Company G. Not Company B, but Company G. I was getting closer, right? And Carl lands in Anzio. Him and his squad are to replace some 3rd Infantry guys that have been on this particular area for a little bit, and they set up a machine gun in the 2nd floor of a house, and that night a German artillery shell hits the house. Him and the other gunner are buried alive in this house for 2 days. The other kid is buried pretty hard, maybe some concrete blocks crushing him, his pelvis. Carl is somewhere else in the pile. They can hear him screaming. And he says to the kid, listen, pray with me, just pray with me. And the kid says, I don't know how to pray. So Carl teaches him how to pray while they're buried under the rubble, while, you know, there's intense firefights going on, there's more artillery landing. But day 2, he doesn't hear the other kid under the rubble screaming anymore, the silence, it's just Carl. Finally, another patrol comes by, Carl screams, they can see him, they dig out the hair of his head, and they're giving him water with a canteen, they're dripping water down into his mouth, and it still takes some time because they're under fire in order to get him out. The other soldier did die. Carl's rescued from the pile at Anzio eventually, after 2 days of being buried alive. In the hospital, he goes to recovery in Naples, and then, whatever, if you can breathe and walk, you're going back to the front lines in World War II. Carl goes back to the front lines, fights from Rome through the East Coast up to Leghorn, and is wounded another time, so that's 2 Purple Hearts, and then eventually here comes the assault on September 12th or 11th of the Gothic Line. Okay, he's Company G, my uncle's Company B. So, the Silver Star. DeChico and his squad have to advance up this hill, except, of course, it's layered with barbed wire. The squad gets under the barbed wire, they're crawling, and then all of a sudden they hear a big pop, and it's a German flare over their head, and they are stuck in the open under barbed wire with a flare in the air. Here comes the pillbox fire. The pillbox is shooting at them, rounds are zipping by, the rest of the squad bails out of there, and Carl decides to go forward underneath the barbed wire. He sets up a rifle grenade. As soon as the German was about to shoot another flare, he fires the rifle grenade takes the German's head clean off, kills the German. He makes his way up to the pillbox. He's got about 7 grenades on him. He carried more than usual grenades because he said that's just the way he did it. And he starts lobbing grenades at the pillbox. Now, Carl would have got the Distinguished Service Cross if not the grenades he was throwing was bouncing off the pillbox and hitting another American squad coming up the other side of the hill. Okay, so his grenades are bouncing off the pillbox and blowing up in the faces of the other American squad that he didn't know was coming up the other side of the hill to assault the pillbox. Luckily, none of those Americans were killed, but still, I think one lieutenant got wounded by a grenade. His grenade. Finally, another German is killed, and the next 3 or 4 guys surrender, which earns Carl the Silver Star. Not the Distinguished Service Cross, because he almost blew up a bunch of Americans. Carl I didn't tell you that Carl had been shot while underneath the barbed wire as well. That's 3 Purple Hearts. He finished the war with a Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters. He was wounded 4 times. He was wounded a 4th time in the Po Valley. Made it home. Worked as an iron worker for 30-something years. Had a family, and that's Carl DeChico. He's still alive in Norristown, Pennsylvania. So he's a big part of my book, and you know, he only went to 1 Red Bull reunion. I can't tell you what year it was. I just know that Colin Powell was supposed to be the guest speaker, but he wanted too much money, and so he didn't do it, and that he was still bothered by that story. So I got G Company, and I move on, and I start meeting other guys from the Pacific, and throughout the Battle of the Bulge, and started uncovering more, but you know what, man, I still don't have B Company. Someone's got to be alive from B Company. I want to know what happened to Andy on that hill. The death reports say he took shrapnel through his lower back and buttocks. As 19 years old, what happened? I do some more research, and it brings me to Mr. Ed Hess, who at 90, he's 100 now. Some of you guys may know him. Allentown, Pennsylvania, drinking Rolling Rock beer. Has anyone ever seen this guy before?
I haven't seen him, but I'll talk about him.
Okay. Ed Hess was originally M Company, 135th Regiment, and then after he also was wounded at Monte Cassino, was transferred then to B Company. All right, so now I am amongst men who were with my great uncle. Why I started this project, why for 2 years I was going around. The Gothic Line, September 12th. It's time to go up the hill, the closest hill near Barberino, Italy. B Company had that hill, was responsible. I believe it was Hill 510, Hill 5 something. And they had to start making their way towards the hill. What they were doing was they were taking anyone who spoke Italian, Americans in their platoon, in their company, put them in civilian clothes and send them into town to see what they could hear the Italians talk about. Where were the Germans? Where were those guys would come back, and everything was pointing towards that hill. They're making their way towards the hill. One of their staff sergeants steps on a mine, blows his leg off, and this platoon of B Company are extremely aggravated that none of the Italian civilians would let them know there was a minefield right before this hill. So they take the closest Italian farmer's sheep, and they herd his sheep right through the minefield to clear the minefield. So now the Americans are advancing through the minefield with sheep dying next to them and screaming and making all sorts of noises, and this is their welcome to Hill 510. Okay, a bunch of bloody sheep. There's one of their soldiers that lost a leg, screaming, twisting and turning sheep, as one other soldier had put it that I interviewed. They get to the hill, and they're making their way up the hill, and their lieutenant takes a round right to the head. First KIA. Lieutenant, his name escapes me right now, I apologize, but he's the first KIA of B Company going up that hill outside Barberino. Before you know it, all the men are saying, we're now, let's go 2-3 days into it. It looks like the Germans had taken a chainsaw to the trees on this hill. Okay, there was just nowhere for these guys to hide, nowhere for them to duck as they advanced up this hill. It was nothing but, again, a U-shaped trench on the hill with Germans in it, pillboxes, spider holes, and snipers. Snipers were picking these guys off. Mr. Hess behind me began to tell me that, we always tell stories about bravery and courage during the Second World War. This one is not one. Guys were mutinying. They were walking off the hill. They were running off the hill. This happened. This is the 3rd guy that told me that this did happen, okay? This is not an embarrassing moment. We can't pass judgment. We have no idea what was going on back then. But guys were, lack of better words, but the way way he said mutiny. So Ed Hess had been carrying the BAR since Monte Casino. He tells his lieutenant, "Sir, I've been carrying the BAR since Monte Casino. What do I have to die? Is that it? Do I have to die up here on this hill? Let me go to the rear. There's plenty of jobs I can do in the rear." The lieutenant says, "No way. You're staying up here with the rest of B Company, and no go." So, for some reason, 30 minutes later, some soldier comes to relieve Ed Hess and takes the BAR from him and says, "Hey, the captain says go back down to the bottom of the hill." Ed Hess leaves, goes down to the hill, and starts working in the rear with company headquarters or whoever was down there at the bottom of this hill. This is all Ed Hess's words, story recorded. He said in the upcoming days he started to realize what hard of a time B Company was having on that hill. Another officer saw Ed Hess at the bottom of the hill and says, "What the F are you doing down here? Go take the GRO men, the Graves Registrations officers, up to the top of that hill now." And Ed Hess made his way up to the hill for the first time in 2 days. And in the video, he starts crying with me. He's 99 years old. If you've ever seen a 99-year-old man cry, it's a hard thing to watch. And he said there was 37 KIA on that hill, one of them being Andy Biggio, my uncle. Ed had to carry each man down that hill with the GRO, and that was his big thanks for nothing. That was his big wanting to go to the rear. Now he had to carry his comrades down to the bottom of the hill. And Ed had cried and told me the story, and I give him as much credit. He could have told me any story he wanted to, that he fought up there gallantry, and raised and won the Bronze Star, but he didn't. He was honest that he tapped out and left the guys up there, and he wasn't the only one. Other guys just took off. But he said to me, well, there was one other guy with me, and his name is John Hyneman. And he actually lives an hour from here. And I go, what? I've been looking for you guys all over the country, and you guys live an hour from each other in the same company? So John Hyneman from Bridgeport, Connecticut, B Company. Maybe he has the missing piece of someone who stayed on the hill. I'll fast forward it, but John, I drive the hour to Bridgeport, Connecticut, I cold knock on this guy's door, I say, "Ed Hess sent me." My uncle was Andy Biggio. He was killed in action with B Company, and he said, "Come on in." They're on this hill. Hymer and 2 other guys have to go and crawl with wire cutters and start cutting the barbed wire during this advance. He said they're cutting the wire, and they look up, and there's 2 German officers staring at them. He said that they puckered up, they looked behind them, the rest of the Americans from their platoon were calling them back, and as they did that, a mortar started dropping more than he had ever seen in his ever being up there on that hill. There was mortars after mortars after mortars. When the smoke cleared, Andy Biggio was dead with the radio on his back with shrapnel through his stomach and on his buttocks. He can only speculate that Andrew stayed standing with the radio to try to give the position of the Germans, and it ultimately took shrapnel through his stomach and on his buttocks. This was after 2 years of interviewing veterans that I finally got down to the bottom of what happened on Hill 510 outside Barberino. A hill that I certainly wouldn't have wanted to be on. A hill that a 19-year-old kid in his squad that were left on by the rest of the company or the rest of the platoon. Because it was suicide. You're going up and the enemy is pointing down at you with a lot of weapons. They know where you're coming from. You have no idea where they are. But it's a sad ending. I don't mean to end it that way because there's 100 other stories on here of men who fought in France, Europe, Belgium, Burma, the Philippines, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and their stories, to me, are in a form of therapy. I hope that veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, Desert Storm, whatever, can open this book and read a story about Larry Kirby who fought on Iwo Jima and say, wow, this guy went through all that and he was able to live to the ripe age of 95 years old, and so can I. And, that's the moral of my story. That's the story of the rifle. I was particularly sharing some Red Bull stories with you guys we didn't go over this guy right here. He's 442nd Regimental Combat Team, 4 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars. His name's Lawson Sakai. Right now they're having their reunion in Las Vegas, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, Japanese Americans. He went to go join the Army back in '43. They said, no way, you're an enemy alien, you're Japanese, you can't serve. And he left, very sad that he couldn't join. Congress turned that around, thanks to the heavy Japanese anti-defamation league that was in the country at the time, and they developed the 100th Battalion in the 442nd. And this guy went on to be a rock star in Italy. Wiping out a lot of enemy positions. But these are just 3 of the 20 Red Bulls I had interviewed. But you know, the story of Ed Hess and him crying and admitting to the grandnephew of someone he served with, I bet it was not something in the shoes that he thought he'd ever be in 75 years later. And so I still stay in touch with him and write him letters back and forth, and it's just the unfortunate spoils of war. But I'm extremely honored to be here. Who would have thought 75 years ago, a couple of weeks later, that I would be here speaking to the association of my great uncle. So I know my family's proud, we're proud, and attack. So thank you guys. Thanks a lot.
So Andy, great story. I don't know how my ending is going to top that, to be honest with you. And I almost debated whether or not I was even going to do my conclusion, but the mention of that name, Ed Hess, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, is amazing. Because I had never met Andy before until last night. Never knew that he had ran into Ed Hess, but I'll tell the story here when I get to the slideshow. But to the last man chapter, or to the last man, Second 135. Sent him gifts on his 100th birthday, and as so the association did as well. So on behalf of the association, I want to present you with the Roaring Bull Book of really our history in War on Terror. But more importantly, inside it, I want to give you this print. So this print right here is the original Marvin Cone. It's a replica, obviously, of the original Marvin Cone print. And Marvin Cone, 100 years ago, was the one who designed the Red Bull that we all wear on our shoulder, or know somebody that wears it on their shoulder. So on behalf of the association, I want to present this to you, along with the print. And I also want Mr. Allison. It'd be my honor if you can present this to Mr. Allison on World War II veterans as well. So thank you so much.
There's 110 names on here, but tonight there's going to be 111. So Don, I hope you'd be honored to sign the rifle that's ultimately going to be on display at the National World War II Museum. So I'd love to have you on there, brother. And if you'd like to go back to Italy this spring, my organization will pay in full for you to return to anywhere you want to go in Italy. So please think about it, sir. And I know you haven't been back yet, and we'll take care of you every step of the way.